The small diner on the edge of town was a place where time seemed to stand still. It wasn't the kind of establishment that garnered glowing reviews or attracted food critics. Instead, it was a haven for the weary. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, flickering as though debating whether to go out entirely, much like the souls who shuffled in during the late-night hours. For Lily Harper, this diner was more than her workplace. It was her battleground. Every creak of the swinging kitchen door, every scrape of forks against chipped plates, and every lingering smell of burnt coffee marked the rhythm of her life. Lily had been working at Benny's Diner for the past 7 years. What had started as a temporary job to pay her way through culinary school had become her reality when her mother fell ill, and the bills mounted faster than her hope could keep up. She dropped out of school without a second thought, telling herself she'd return once things settled down. But life had a way of dragging dreams into the shadows, and soon, the years slipped by in a haze of early mornings and late nights. Physically, Lily bore the marks of her struggles. Her sneakers were scuffed and patched with duct tape in places where the soles had worn thin. The once bright pink uniform she wore had faded to a dull rose, the name tag on her chest barely legible. Yet, her most defining feature wasn't her appearance, it was her resilience. Despite everything, Lily had an indomitable spirit. She greeted each customer with a warm smile that could light up the diner far better than the flickering neon. Tonight was one of those particularly grueling shifts. The diner was understaffed, leaving Lily to juggle the responsibilities of waitress, busser, and cashier. The air was thick with the scent of grease and disinfectant, and the jukebox hummed with a tinny rendition of an old country song. It was well past midnight, and the diner's patrons were a mix of exhausted truck drivers, young couples escaping the monotony of their small-town lives, and the occasional oddball. "Lily, table 4 needs a refill," barked Benny, the diner's owner, from the kitchen. His voice was gruff, but it carried a note of familiarity. Benny had become something of a father figure to Lily over the years, though his tough love often left her questioning her life choices. "On it," Lily called back, grabbing the coffee pot. She wove through the narrow aisles, dodging a toddler's toy truck and offering a quick "be right with you" to a woman waving her down from the counter. Her energy was waning, but she knew better than to let it show. A single dissatisfied customer could mean a docked paycheck, and Lily couldn't afford to lose a cent. As she approached table 4, she noticed the man sitting there. He wasn't like the usual customers, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and dark jeans. He exuded an air of calm detachment. His hands, resting on the edge of the table, were clean and well manicured. Unusual for someone dining in a place like this. His coffee sat untouched, steam curling lazily from the cup. "Refill?" Lily asked, her voice carrying a practiced cheerfulness. The man glanced up, his eyes meeting hers. There was something disarming about his gaze, sharp, intelligent, and a little too observant. "Sure," he said, his voice low and measured. He didn't smile, but there was no hostility in his tone. Lily poured the coffee, her hand steady despite the weariness that weighed on her. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said, flashing her usual smile before moving on to the next table. What Lily didn't realize was that this seemingly ordinary man was far from ordinary. His name was Ethan Kane, a self-made billionaire who had earned his fortune through a combination of tech innovation and unyielding determination. Tonight, however, he wasn't here to close a deal or escape the pressures of his high-powered life. He was here because he'd been driving aimlessly, searching for something he couldn't quite define, and the flickering neon of Benny's Diner had drawn him in like a moth to a flame. Ethan watched Lily as she moved through the diner, her interactions with customers revealing her character in ways no resume or interview could. He noticed how she knelt to pick up the toddler's truck, handing it back with a playful smile, and how she took the time to chat with an elderly couple about the weather, even though the diner was busy. She treated every customer with a kindness that felt genuine, not forced, a rarity in a world that often felt cold and transactional. What struck Ethan most, however, was the fleeting moment when Lily thought no one was watching. As she stood behind the counter, rubbing her temples and glancing at the clock, the weight of her exhaustion was evident. Yet, when a customer called out, her demeanor shifted instantly, her smile returning as though it had never left. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes to Ethan. As the night wore on, Ethan remained at his table, observing Lily with growing interest. He wasn't sure what had compelled him to stay so long, but something about her intrigued him. Perhaps it was the contrast between her external cheerfulness and the quiet determination he glimpsed beneath it. Or maybe it was the fact that, despite her struggles, she carried herself with a dignity that many people in far better circumstances lacked. When Lily brought him the check, Ethan hesitated for a moment before reaching for his wallet. "You work hard," he said, his tone neutral but his words weighted with meaning. Lily chuckled lightly, mistaking his comment for small talk. "Someone has to keep this place running," she replied, pocketing the check and heading back to the counter. She didn't notice the thoughtful expression on Ethan's face as he watched her walk away. What Lily didn't know was that her life was about to change. This quiet observer, who had blended so seamlessly into the background of her chaotic night, was about to set events in motion that would alter her future in ways she could never have imagined. The hum of Ethan Kane's car engine had been his only companion for hours. Driving aimlessly through unfamiliar towns, he had no destination in mind, only the need to escape the suffocating expectations of his life. His phone had been buzzing nonstop with texts and emails from board members, business partners, and socialites desperate for his attention, but he ignored it all. For once, he wanted to experience life outside the carefully curated bubble of wealth and power. When he spotted the flickering neon sign of Benny's Diner, something compelled him to pull over. The place looked utterly ordinary, even a little run down, but that was precisely what appealed to him. Ethan wanted anonymity, and this small-town diner seemed like the kind of place where no one would recognize him or care about the weight his name carried. As he stepped inside, the first thing that hit him was the warm scent of coffee and fried food. The second was the vibrant hum of life. It was a sharp contrast to the sterile, polished restaurants he usually frequented, where every detail was meticulously crafted to cater to the ultra-wealthy. Here, the atmosphere was raw and genuine, the kind of place where people laughed too loudly, and the jukebox played songs from decades past. Ethan scanned the room, taking in the eclectic mix of patrons. His eyes finally landed on the waitress weaving through the tables with practiced ease. She was petite, with auburn hair that was hastily tied into a messy bun. Her uniform was faded, her sneakers worn down, but her smile lit up the room. She moved with a quiet confidence that belied the exhaustion etched into her features. He chose a booth in the corner, deliberately placing himself in her section. As she approached to take his order, Ethan was struck by how her smile didn't falter despite the dark circles under her eyes. She treated him with the same warmth she offered everyone else, asking about his night as though she genuinely cared. Her voice was soft, yet it carried an undercurrent of strength, a strength that piqued Ethan's curiosity. "Just coffee for now," he said, his tone neutral. "Coming right up," she replied, scribbling his order onto her notepad before moving on to another table. Ethan watched her closely, though not in a way that would make her uncomfortable. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe it was the way she interacted with the other customers, or the small, unnoticed acts of kindness she performed without expecting anything in return. When a toddler accidentally knocked over a glass of milk, she crouched down to clean it up, reassuring the frazzled parents with a smile and a soft laugh. When an elderly man fumbled with his wallet, she discreetly helped him count his change. To anyone else, these moments might have seemed insignificant, but to Ethan, They were profound. He had spent years surrounded by people who measured their worth in wealth and status, people who rarely lifted a finger unless there was something in it for them. This waitress, Lily, as he overheard someone call her, was different. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that money couldn't buy. As the hours passed, Ethan found himself lingering far longer than he intended. He ordered a slice of pie. He didn't really want just to keep his table occupied. He studied the details of the diner. The faded photographs on the walls, the chipped mugs, the handwritten specials board. It was a stark contrast to his world of luxury, but it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. Meanwhile, Lily continued to work tirelessly, unaware of the man's growing interest in her. To her, he was just another customer, polite but unremarkable. She didn't notice the way his eyes followed her as she moved through the diner, or the way he seemed to hang on every word she said. Eventually, the diner began to empty out. The truck drivers returned to their rigs and the young couples drifted home. Only a handful of patrons remained, and Ethan was still among them. He watched as Lily took a moment to lean against the counter, rubbing her temples and glancing at the clock. Her exhaustion was palpable, but when a new customer walked in, she straightened up and greeted them with the same warmth as before. Ethan found himself thinking about his own journey. He had started with nothing, just a dream and a relentless drive to succeed. Now he was one of the richest men in the world, but he often wondered what it had all been for. His life was a whirlwind of meetings, deals, and social events, but it often felt hollow. Watching Lily, he was reminded of the simple joys he had lost along the way. The satisfaction of hard work, the importance of kindness, the beauty of resilience. When Lily finally brought him his check, Ethan hesitated. He wanted to say something, to let her know that he saw her, truly saw her, but he wasn't sure how to put it into words. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, slipping it under the check. "Thanks for the great service," he said simply, his tone sincere. Lily blinked in surprise, glancing at the bill. "That's way too much," she said, trying to hand it back. Ethan shook his head. "You earned it." She hesitated, then smiled. "Thank you." "Really?" As Ethan walked out into the cool night air, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something extraordinary. He had no idea what he was going to do next, but one thing was certain. He wasn't done with Lily Harper. As the diner's neon sign hummed faintly in the early hours of the morning, Ethan Kane sat in his car, replaying the events of the night in his mind. Something about Lily Harper had struck a chord deep within him. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. Her quiet strength and relentless kindness had stirred something he hadn't felt in years. A sense of connection, an almost forgotten admiration for genuine humanity. But admiration alone wasn't enough. Ethan had built his empire on action, not passivity. Now, he wanted to see just how far Lily's compassion extended. The next evening, Ethan returned to the diner. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, so he once again donned the simple attire that allowed him to blend into the crowd. As he stepped inside, the warmth of the diner enveloped him, along with the hum of conversation and the faint clatter of dishes. Lily was there, moving with the same effortless grace, though the weariness in her eyes was more pronounced than the night before. This time, Ethan wasn't content to simply observe. He wanted to test her, gently, of course, but enough to understand if her kindness was as unwavering as it seemed. He devised a simple plan, one that wouldn't arouse suspicion, but would allow him to gauge her character on a deeper level. Ethan took a seat at a corner booth, the same one he had occupied the previous night. He placed a crumpled $5 bill on the table, leaving it conspicuously in view as Lily approached with her notepad in hand. "Back again?" she asked with a smile, though her tone carried a hint of surprise. Ethan nodded. "Couldn't stay away. The coffee's better than I expected." Lily laughed softly, jotting down his order for another cup. "I'll let Benny know. He'll take that as a personal victory." As she walked away, Ethan reached into his pocket and retrieved a small stack of bills. He carefully slid the crumpled 5 beneath the stack, ensuring it was visible but slightly hidden. When Lily returned with his coffee, he made sure to act distracted, fumbling with his wallet and dropping a few coins onto the floor. "Sorry about that," he said, bending down to pick them up. Lily noticed the crumpled bill beneath the stack and paused. She hesitated for a moment, glancing between the money and Ethan. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but Ethan saw the flicker of indecision cross her face. Then, without a word, she reached out and placed the crumpled bill back on the table. "You must have missed this," she said, her voice steady. Ethan looked up, feigning confusion. "Are you sure? I thought I counted everything." Lily nodded, her smile warm but firm. "It's all here. You wouldn't want to lose anything." Ethan felt a pang of respect. She could have pocketed the extra cash without him ever knowing, but she hadn't. Her honesty was refreshing, a stark contrast to the cutthroat world he was used to. The night continued, and Ethan observed Lily closely as she navigated the challenges of her shift. She moved with her usual efficiency, pausing to chat with regulars and offering small gestures of kindness. A free refill here, a reassuring word there. It wasn't until a disheveled man entered the diner that Ethan's second test began. The man, clearly homeless, shuffled to the counter with hesitant steps. His clothes were worn, his hair unkempt, and his hands trembled slightly as he placed a few crumpled bills on the counter. "Coffee," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Lily didn't hesitate. She poured the coffee and placed it in front of him, her smile as genuine as if he'd ordered the most expensive item on the menu. "Here you go," she said, her tone gentle. The man looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and shame. I don't think I have enough for a refill." Lily waved him off with a smile. "Don't worry about it. Refills are on the house tonight." Ethan watched the exchange with interest. Lily didn't just give the man coffee. She gave him dignity. She treated him like any other customer, never making him feel less than the truckers or families who filled the other booths. Later that night, as the diner began to empty, Ethan decided to up the ante. He approached the counter, pulling a small stack of papers from his pocket. They were official-looking, stamped with logos and printed on heavy paper. He slid them across the counter to Lily. "Can you help me with something?" he asked, feigning exasperation. "I'm trying to figure out where I went wrong with this application. It's for a job I've been trying to get, but they keep rejecting me." Lily glanced at the papers, her brow furrowing as she read through them. She didn't recognize the logos, nor did she understand the technical jargon, but she could see the frustration in Ethan's expression. "Well, I'm not an expert," she said, "but maybe I can help. Let's figure it out together." Ethan felt a flicker of surprise. Most people would have brushed him off, unwilling to invest their time in a stranger's problems. But Lily sat with him, reading through the papers and offering suggestions. She treated him as though his success mattered to her, even though she had no stake in the outcome. By the end of the night, Ethan had seen enough. Lily's kindness wasn't performative or conditional. It was who she was at her core. He left the diner with a sense of clarity, knowing exactly what he needed to do next. The next morning dawned like any other for Lily Harper. She woke to the shrill buzz of her alarm clock. Her cramped studio apartment bathed in the pale light of dawn. She dressed quickly, slipping into her faded uniform and tying her hair back into its usual messy bun. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror looked the same as it always did. Tired but determined, she grabbed her bag, which carried little more than her notepad and a tattered paperback novel she'd been meaning to finish, and headed out the door. By the time she arrived at Benny's diner, the morning rush had already begun. The regulars were seated in their usual spots. Old Mr. Jensen with his crossword puzzle, the Hendersons sharing a stack of pancakes, and a few truckers nursing mugs of steaming coffee. Lily slipped into her role seamlessly, moving from table to table with practiced ease. But something was different today. As she approached the counter to grab an order, Benny stopped her, his thick brows furrowed in confusion. "Lily," he said, holding up a cream-colored envelope. "This came for you?" "For me?" Lily asked, taking the envelope. Her name was scrawled across the front in elegant handwriting. She turned it over, noticing a wax seal stamped with an unfamiliar emblem. A pair of wings encircled by a laurel wreath. "I don't know," Benny said with a shrug. "Some guy dropped it off early this morning. Said it was important." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't remember the last time she'd received anything more than bills or junk mail. She tore open the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a single sheet of thick, expensive paper. The message was brief. "Dear Lily, life has a way of testing the kind-hearted, and you have passed with flying colors. You don't know me, but I've been watching your dedication and compassion, and I believe you have the potential for something greater. Enclosed, you will find the first step toward a brighter future. Be at this address at 4 p.m. tomorrow. Trust me, it will be worth your time. Sincerely, a friend." Beneath the note was a second piece of paper with an address printed on it. One Lily didn't recognize. The handwriting was elegant, almost regal, and the message was cryptic enough to leave her both intrigued and apprehensive. She looked up at Benny, her brows knit in confusion. "You know anything about this?" she asked. He shook his head. "Beats me. But whoever it is has good taste in stationery." Lily laughed nervously, but her mind was racing. Who would send her something like this? And why? The phrasing, "I've been watching your dedication and compassion," made her stomach churn. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? But the letter didn't feel malicious. If anything, it felt oddly hopeful. She spent the rest of her shift distracted, her mind looping through endless possibilities. When she finally got a break, she pulled out her phone and searched the address. It led to a building downtown, a towering glass structure that seemed far too grand for someone like her to step into. What kind of person worked in a place like that? By the time her shift ended, Lily was no closer to an answer. She spent the next day nervously preparing for the mysterious meeting, cycling through every possible outcome in her mind. She didn't own much in the way of formal clothing, so she settled for her nicest blouse and a pair of clean jeans. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something far bigger than she could understand. When she arrived at the address, she found herself standing in front of an imposing skyscraper. The revolving doors gleamed under the sunlight, and a doorman greeted her with a polite nod. "Miss Harper?" he asked, as though he'd been expecting her. "Yes," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Right this way," he replied, opening the door for her. Lily stepped inside, her breath catching as she took in the opulent interior. The lobby was vast, with marble floors, towering columns, and a crystal chandelier that cast a kaleidoscope of light across the walls. A receptionist behind a sleek desk directed her to the elevator, handing her a keycard that gave her access to the top floor. As the elevator ascended, Lily's nerves intensified. She clutched the keycard tightly, her palms damp with sweat. When the doors opened, she stepped into a spacious office that seemed more like an art gallery. The walls were lined with abstract paintings, and the furniture was modern yet inviting. Standing by the window, his back to her, was Ethan Kane. Lily froze. She recognized him instantly as the quiet man who had sat in her section at the diner. But what was he doing here? And why had he summoned her? "Miss Harper," he said, turning to face her. His expression was calm, almost unreadable. "I'm glad you came." "Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" Ethan gestured for her to sit, and as she did, he explained everything. He told her how he had come to the diner on a whim, seeking refuge from the chaos of his life, and how he had been struck by her kindness and resilience. He admitted to testing her, watching to see if her compassion was genuine, and said he had never encountered anyone quite like her. "I know this all sounds strange," Ethan said, his voice steady, "but I've spent my life surrounded by people who only care about money and power. You're different. You remind me of what it means to be human, and I want to help you achieve your dreams." Lily stared at him, her mind racing. "I don't understand." "Why me?" "Because you deserve it," Ethan replied simply. "You've worked so hard for so long, and I want to give you the opportunity to do something for yourself." He handed her a folder filled with documents. Inside was everything she needed to enroll in culinary school, fully funded by Ethan himself. There was also a check, a staggering sum that would cover her living expenses while she pursued her dream. Lily's hands trembled as she looked at the folder. "This is too much. I can't accept this." "You can," Ethan said, his voice firm. "And you will, because I believe in you." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, not just for survival, but for a future filled with possibility. Lily Harper sat on the edge of her worn-out couch, staring at the folder Ethan Kane had handed her. The documents inside were like artifacts from another life. A life she had never thought she could touch. Acceptance forms from a prestigious culinary school, a check with more zeros than she could comprehend, and a detailed plan for how she could make her dreams a reality. It felt surreal, as though any moment she might wake up and find herself back in the diner, scrubbing tables and wondering how she'd make rent. But this wasn't a dream. It was real. And for the first time in years, Lily felt something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan had arranged for her to meet with a career counselor who helped her prepare for the transition to culinary school. He insisted on covering all the costs, from tuition to housing, so she could focus solely on her studies. Lily had never been one to accept handouts, but Ethan had a way of convincing her that this wasn't charity. It was an investment in her potential. Leaving Benny's diner was bittersweet. The staff had been like family to her, and Benny himself gave her a long, fatherly hug on her last day. "Go show the world what you've got," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "You've earned this." With Benny's encouragement echoing in her mind, Lily packed her meager belongings into a single suitcase and boarded a train bound for the city where the culinary school was located. She felt a mix of excitement and fear. Could she really do this? Was she good enough? What if she failed? Her doubts were loud, but she silenced them with determination. She owed it to herself and to Ethan not to squander this opportunity. Lily's first day at the culinary school was overwhelming. The campus was sprawling and pristine, with state-of-the-art kitchens and classrooms filled with aspiring chefs from all over the world. Many of them came from wealthy families and had trained under renowned chefs before arriving here. Lily, with her thrift store sneakers and diner experience, felt out of place. Her instructors, however, saw her potential immediately. Lily was a natural in the kitchen, her years at the diner giving her an edge in efficiency and improvisation. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, spending hours after class practicing her knife skills and experimenting with recipes. While others hesitated to get their hands dirty, Lily thrived on the hard work. Her passion was undeniable. Despite her progress, the journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of the techniques she was learning. During one particularly grueling week, Lily failed a critical exam on French sauces, leaving her confidence shattered. She sat in her dorm room that night, staring at her textbooks with tears streaming down her face. Ethan called her that evening, his voice steady and reassuring. "Failure isn't the end, Lily," he told her. "It's just part of the process. The question isn't whether you'll fail, it's whether you'll keep going." His words lit a fire in her. The next day, Lily met with her instructor, asking for additional help. She spent hours in the practice kitchen, perfecting her techniques until her hands ached. By the time she retook the exam, she aced it, earning praise from even the toughest critics. As months turned into years, Lily transformed in ways she never thought possible. Her confidence grew with every dish she perfected, and her creativity flourished in the supportive environment of the school. She began to develop her own culinary style, one that combined the comfort food of her diner days with the sophisticated techniques she was learning. Her professors took notice, often singling her out during class to demonstrate for her peers. Outside of school, Lily became a fixture in the local culinary scene. Ethan had encouraged her to network, and she took his advice to heart, attending food festivals and workshops. She even interned at a Michelin-starred restaurant, where she learned firsthand what it took to run a world-class kitchen. Though the work was grueling, Lily thrived under the pressure, earning the respect of even the most seasoned chefs. Through it all, Ethan remained a steady presence in her life. He rarely interfered but always checked in to see how she was doing. His faith in her never wavered, and Lily often found herself drawing strength from his belief in her abilities. By the time she graduated at the top of her class, Lily was no longer the timid waitress who had doubted her worth. She was a confident, skilled chef with a clear vision for her future. Her dream of opening her own restaurant no longer felt like an impossible fantasy. It was within her grasp. Ethan surprised her on graduation day, showing up unannounced with a small bouquet of flowers and a proud smile. "I told you could do it," he said, his voice warm. Lily hugged him tightly, her gratitude overflowing. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You did the hard part," Ethan replied. "I just gave you a little push." As they stood together, watching the other graduates celebrate, Ethan handed her another envelope. Inside was a deed to a small but charming restaurant space in the heart of the city. "It's yours," he said. "A place to make your dream come true." Lily's hands trembled as she held the deed, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll make it amazing," he replied with a grin. "Because I know you will." Lily Harper stood at the entrance of her new restaurant, a mixture of nerves and exhilaration coursing through her veins. The sleek signage above the door read Harper's Table, a name she had chosen to reflect the warmth and inclusivity she wanted her restaurant to embody. The interior was a blend of modern elegance and rustic charm, with warm wooden tables, soft lighting, and an open kitchen that allowed patrons to watch the culinary magic unfold. It was everything she had ever dreamed of and more, a physical manifestation of years of hard work and an unwavering belief in her vision. The grand opening had drawn a crowd larger than Lily could have anticipated. Local foodies, journalists, and curious passers-by had gathered, their chatter filling the crisp evening air. She glanced at her reflection in the glass door, adjusting her chef's coat and taking a deep breath. Tonight wasn't just the start of her restaurant. It was the culmination of a journey that had taken her from a struggling waitress to a rising star in the culinary world. As the first guests entered, Lily greeted them personally, her warmth setting the tone for the evening. She floated effortlessly between the kitchen and the dining area, checking on guests, tasting dishes, and ensuring every plate that left the kitchen was perfect. The menu was a reflection of her story, a blend of comfort food inspired by her diner days and sophisticated dishes that showcased her technical skills. Among the guests was Ethan Kane, seated at a corner table with an unassuming presence that belied the critical role he had played in Lily's transformation. He watched her work with quiet pride, marveling at how far she had come. Lily had insisted that he attend, and though he rarely appeared in public, he wouldn't have missed this for the world. As the night progressed, the restaurant buzzed with energy. Diners raved about the food, and the atmosphere was electric, with the excitement of discovering something new and special. Lily's team, a group of young chefs she had handpicked and trained herself, worked with precision and passion, embodying the culture of excellence she had cultivated. Toward the end of the evening, Ethan motioned for Lily to join him at his table. She approached, her cheeks flushed from the excitement and activity of the night. "Congratulations," Ethan said, raising his glass. "This place is extraordinary." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head. "All I did was open a door. You're the one who walked through it." As they spoke, a journalist approached, her notebook in hand. "Excuse me," she said, glancing between them. "I couldn't help but notice you two seem to know each other. Care to share the story?" Lily hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but Ethan nodded. "Go ahead," he said. "It's your story to tell." Taking a deep breath, Lily recounted the events that had brought her to this moment. She spoke about her time at the diner, the mysterious letter, and the journey of self-discovery and growth that followed. She didn't shy away from acknowledging Ethan's role, but she made it clear that the hard work had been hers. "He saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself," Lily said, her voice steady. "And he gave me the chance to prove what I was capable of." The journalist scribbled furiously, her eyes wide with interest. "This is incredible," she said. "A real-life fairy tale." As word of Lily's story spread, Harper's table became more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the power of second chances. Diners traveled from far and wide to experience the food that had been crafted with so much heart and soul. And Lily found herself the subject of numerous profiles and interviews. Yet, through it all, she remained grounded, never forgetting where she had come from. She often visited Benny's diner, bringing her team along for the occasional meal. Benny beamed with pride whenever she walked through the door, declaring to anyone who would listen, "That's my girl. Told you she'd make it big." Months after the opening, Lily received an invitation to an exclusive gala honoring innovators in the culinary world. She was surprised to find her name listed among the nominees. Even more so when she was called to the stage to accept an award for Most Inspirational Chef of the Year. As she stood at the podium, the applause ringing in her ears, she searched the crowd for Ethan, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. In her acceptance speech, Lily spoke not of her success, but of the people who had supported her along the way. She urged others to believe in themselves and to seize opportunities, no matter how daunting they might seem. "Sometimes, all it takes is one person to see your potential," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But you have to be willing to put in the work to turn that belief into reality." Ethan approached her after the event, his expression one of quiet pride. "You've come a long way, Lily," he said, "but something tells me this is just the beginning." She smiled, her heart full. "And I couldn't have done it without you." "Maybe," he replied, "but now it's time for you to pay it forward." Lily nodded, already knowing how she would. She began mentoring young chefs from underprivileged backgrounds, offering them the same opportunities she had been given. Her restaurant became a hub for aspiring talent, a place where dreams were nurtured and futures were built. Years later, when people asked Lily how she had achieved so much, she would smile and say, "It all started with a cup of coffee and a little kindness." And though she would never forget the struggles she had faced, she knew they had shaped her into the person she was today. A testament to the transformative power of compassion, hard work, and the generosity of one unlikely benefactor.